Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sneha and today I'm doing a tag video called Another Palette Tag. By the way, if you enjoy these kind of tag videos, please don't forget to hit that like button and also consider subscribing for more videos. I was asked by one of my subscribers, Jo, and I believe her username is Jo_V80, but I'm going to link her right here. And she was the one who recommended checking this video out, which was first done by Kaylee. And I really liked it. So I figured I would enjoy doing this tag. So here it is. So I did reach out to my friend Antariksha, who's also an eyeshadow palette junkie like I am. So I will be linking both her channel and the video once it goes live right here. So don't forget to check that out. She is a wonderful Indian YouTuber and probably one of the few ones that I can totally relate to because she's kind of calm, I think, when she talks. She's not the over-the-top, hyperactive YouTuber that you typically associate with a beauty YouTuber. And then I just, in general, really like her content. So if you haven't subscribed to her, consider doing that. Again, the channel and the video will be linked right here. So basically, this tag video has 9 questions. And I believe these are all eyeshadow palette specific questions. So I'm very excited. Let's start with question 1. The first question is, what's your first palette? So I think my first palette, not including single eyeshadows or palettes that I've made, would be the Urban Decay Original Naked palette. And yeah, it's still going strong. I think I've had it for, almost 7 years, since the time it launched basically. And it's still running strong. Actually used it yesterday for a very wearable everyday tutorial. And I think I would want to do a 3 looks 1 palette with this. So let me know in the comment section below if you have this palette and if you're interested in the 3 looks 1 palette video for this. But yeah, this is the first palette I bought and I still continue to use it to this day. The second question is, what's your most recent purchase? So for that, that's going to be the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. This was the last eyeshadow palette that I've purchased and I love it. That's what I have on my eyes today. Sunset. And of course, this is what the palette looks like. It is absolutely beautiful and I truly love this palette. The quality of the eyeshadows is amazing. The color selection is great, although I don't like this particular shade and I would have rather had something like a nude transition shade for the brow bone or a purple. That would have been amazing for this palette. But this is a palette I use a ton and there is a lot of eyeshadows in here. I know it's super expensive, but this is totally worth it for someone like me who loves a lot of these warm, golden, orangey kind of tones. So truly enjoy using this palette. So the next question is one that you regret missing out on. Now, I know a lot of people for this particular question said or referenced back to the Kat Von D, I don't know what it's called. It was basically a rainbow palette. I'm going to insert a picture if I can find it online, but it's basically very colorful palette. And I don't think that is something that I missed out on just because I have the Viseart editorial palette and I have so many colors right in here, as you can see, and these are brilliant quality eyeshadows. So for me, I had to think quite a bit because I typically don't miss out on palettes, and if I like something, I just pick it up. So a palette that I think I regret missing out would be the Anastasia Mario palette, I believe it was called. It was the collaboration with the Kim Kardashian makeup artist Mario. So I think that palette had really nice wearable eyeshadows, and since I like modern renaissance so much, I think I would have enjoyed that palette. And because that was a limited edition palette, I cannot get my hands on it anymore. So that's the palette I think I regret not buying. So the next question is a palette that makes you happy to look at. And I think it's going to be my Viseart editorial palette. This is what it looks like. This is the brand new one, so that's why it looks quite unused. I have the one that I'm using in my drawer. But just look at the colors. It just makes me happy. I love colors and this truly inspires me to get out of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. And just looking at all these colors together just genuinely makes me happy. So I think this is the palette for that question. So question 5 is a palette that you've changed your mind about. And without a doubt, I think this is the palette that I've truly changed my mind about. It's the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. It's a palette that I regret buying. It was a gift from my husband, so technically I didn't buy it. But these colors just don't do much to my skin tone, or at least that's what I thought. So I was kind of disappointed because just look at the palette. It's like 3/4 of the palette is kind of light and muted tones that don't really pop on my skin tone. So, and there's like 2 deeper tones and they're not really deepening shades. So I didn't have very much hope from this and I just kept it aside and I didn't really bother putting it on my eyelids. But recently I've been bringing this out and trying to get some use out of it, and I was surprised with how many soft, beautiful looks I can create with it, and it doesn't make me look sick like I thought it would, and actually pink looks quite good on my skin tone. So I was happy with this palette, but I do think that this is more suited for light to medium skin tones, definitely not for darker skin tones than mine. So this is definitely a palette that I've changed my mind about. Still not one of my favorite palettes, but it's something that I can get use out of. So number 6 is a palette that surprised you. Now in this, it can be 2 ways. One where you didn't have much expectation and something that blew your mind out, and something that you had a lot of expectations from and that completely let you down. So I have one for each. So let's first look at the palette that I had hopes from, but that totally let me down. It's the It Cosmetics Naturally Pretty one. This is old palette. I bought it when it first launched. And this is what the palette looks like inside. And as you can see against my skin tone, none of these shades really pop. They are kind of muted and pastel and kind of dull, I would say, on my skin tone. So this palette definitely would look better on light to light medium skin tones, but definitely not on tan and darker skin tones. The colors kind of look similar. The only colors that I really liked that was back in the day when we did have these kind of eyeshadows. But these are the 2 shades that I did use from this palette. But otherwise this palette is mostly unused because the pigmentation is not much on these eyeshadows. And again, the shades are kind of pastel, which I don't like on my particular skin tone. So this is a palette that was a letdown. And then a palette that totally surprised me. And I bought this palette just because I wanted to support the YouTuber Kathleen Lights. So it's her collaboration with Morphe. And this is what the palette looks like. This was a limited edition palette, but I really was surprised, pleasantly surprised with the quality of these eyeshadows. They're not the easiest to blend. I mean, I'm going to be honest about that, but they're quite pigmented and really nice, especially since I paid less than $15 for this palette. And I have 15 eyeshadows, so this definitely surprised me. So the next question is a palette that inspires you the most, and this was kind of tough because usually colors inspire me to create looks. So I don't know, I didn't have one palette that had both a range of colors in satin shimmery finish and also in matte finish. So I did cheat and pick 2 palettes instead. So it has to be these 2 guys. So this is the Viseart editorial palette, which we have discussed before on this video. And this is the Urban Decay Electric palette. Sadly, this has been discontinued, so it's going to be a limited edition palette right now. But these 2 are amazing. I'm going to open this one and show you guys. So when you open these palettes, you will either get very intimidated or you will feel supercharged and inspired to create looks. And I'm the latter, so I love color and I love creating new looks with these eyeshadows. So these are the palettes that I would consider inspirational. And can I cheat and include another palette? I think I'm going to include this palette as well, the one I have on right now, because it has these beautiful pops of red, orange, yellow, gold, all of these tones which are not in the other palettes that I mentioned. But this palette totally inspires me to create both sunset inspired looks, but also something more editorial, I would say, like with that pop of yellow or just red all over the eyelid and stuff like that. So I think I had to mention this in this category as well. I'm not doing too well, am I? Next question is palette on your wish list. So there are 2 palettes that I've been eyeing, and I know Antariksha is going to talk about these. I think they're going to feature in her favorites, I think in one of these tag questions, or I hope they do. The first one is the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette. which looks like this one. It just looks like such a beautiful neutral palette, but still has those oranges and plums and burgundy tones in there, which I think I'm going to love. And I've really been wanting to try the formula of the eyeshadows because I've heard so many people, including Antariksha, rave about these. So that's number one. And the second palette that I've been wanting to get is the Juvia's Place Masquerade palette. Just because I've not tried the brand yet, and I would like to get a flavor for their eyeshadow quality. So that's another palette on my list. And the last question is your no-fail palette. Now this question is so difficult for me because ideally you would want one palette which has both your neutrals and your shimmery tones in a wide range of colors. And I don't have one palette which does that for me. But amongst the palettes, I do have a few picks. So again, I do not have one palette that's a no-fail, but I have multiple palettes. So if I had to go for a neutral palette and include just one palette which had both mattes and satin shimmery eyeshadows, I think I would go with the Lorac Pro, the original palette. And this is what the palette looks like. And I've used it quite a few times, and every time I create a look, it just turns out quite nice and very wearable, I would say, with this particular palette. So this is a palette I definitely recommend, especially if you're a beginner in makeup and you just want to get a feel for matte and shimmery satin finish eyeshadows. This is a great palette to start out with. Another palette that's a no-fail for me is the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. Anytime I've done a look with this, it just turns out really nice and I get a lot of compliments. I do think these eyeshadows just blend themselves out, and therefore anytime I need a warm look, or if I need a yellow or this beautiful dark brown or red tone, which I don't have in my other palettes, this is what I grab. So I love this one. Another palette which I know creates stunning looks no matter what colors I'm using from it is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. Again, a good blend of both matte and satin or shimmery eyeshadows in this particular palette, and you also get a few pop of colors, and they all show up beautifully on the eye. So this is another palette that I think no matter what colors I use, the final eye look always tends to look good. And of course, this video wouldn't be complete without mentioning all of my Viseart eyeshadow palettes. No matter what I create with these, I know they are foolproof. If I need neutrals from Viseart, I have my Sultry Muse palette, which I absolutely love. Then I have my neutral matte palette, which is like a staple. And then I also have my warm matte palette. And then when I want something colorful and out of the box, and I know it's going to be good quality eyeshadows, very easy to blend, I can always rely on these Viseart eyeshadows. Again, this is the dark matte and this is the editorial palette. I really hope you enjoyed my answers to these questions. Sorry that I had multiple picks for some of the questions, but these palettes are genuinely worth it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
Open eye, feel the waves cut through me.